guys, what's going on? Jeff back here from the homestead, and this week what I want to talk about is setting up your own hydroponic system at home. So if you caught the title, we are doing a DIY deep water culture system, and we are going to go through everything you need to do from start to finish in order to set that up in your own house. So sit back and enjoy. Okay, so let's dive right on in. You'll notice I have everything spread out in front of me. So I've got a seed tray or a growing tray. I've got my nutrient solution just in the top left-hand corner there. It's already had my nutrients added and it's been pH'd to the proper pH. So what I'm doing is I'm opening up my Grodin A-OK starter plugs, and these are essentially rock wool, but they need to be pH'd and soaked prior to use. So you need to get them nice and saturated, not so saturated that they're dripping and soaked, but wet enough that it can actually create a nice environment for your seed to start germinating. Now, the length of time you're actually going to go ahead and soak these for is largely dependent on the size of cube you have. So I'm using 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch starters. You don't need to soak them for much more than 8 to 10 seconds before they're completely saturated. You'll notice that they're all falling to the bottom of my bowl very quickly. If you are working with larger cubes, especially their 6x6s, etc., it might take a little bit longer in order for them to be fully saturated. So what I'm doing is once they are fully saturated and sunk to the bottom, I lift them out, I let them drip completely off, then I place them in my seed tray. So let's go ahead and soak the rest of these cubes quickly here and get ready to start planting our seeds. Alright, so we've got all our seeds set up here in the order that I want to plant them into my Grodin starter cubes or starter plugs. The reason I've lined them up like this is because then I know what I've planted where and I can create myself a bit of a planting plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant about 2 to 3 seeds per cube. And the reason I do this is because not every seed germinates, and even if you read the back of seed packets or look at companies' websites, they tend to say, 75 to 80% of seeds will germinate. So this just allows us to hedge our bets, if you will, and keep a better chance or better odds of every plant having at least one seed that'll germinate. So the first thing you're going to notice is that dropping seeds directly into those holes becomes a little bit of a challenge, especially with that wet Grodin material or rock wool material. So what I'll do is I'll grab just the flat end of a wooden skewer to help push them down into that hole. Next, I'm just ripping off a small corner piece and just rolling it up into a little bit of a ball and lightly tucking it in the top of that hole. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I want to create a nice moist and humid environment where I'm keeping as much moisture surrounding that seed and humidity surrounding that seed as possible. What I will then do about the 24 to 48 hour mark is pop those off so the seeds, once they do germinate, actually have a chance to push the plant out, so it doesn't get all blocked and stuck inside the Grodin cube. So I'm just going to continue planting the rest of the seeds here, and we'll skip ahead to the final few cubes. Alright, so I have all my seeds planted and every little hole is covered with a chunk of rock wool, and I also started 4 cuttings there on the left side. The last thing we're going to do is stick our hood or our dome on top to keep some of that humidity in. And there you have it. That's everything to start your seeds for your hydroponic system. Alrighty guys, moving on to step 2 of our project, and that's actually building our hydroponic system itself. So yesterday, or I guess early in the video, we started the seed pods and the rock wool. Now it's time to move on to the actual chambers themselves. So I'm just using a standard Tupperware here. It's about 19 liters big, perfect for me to move it by myself without having to empty out water. I went with gray because I don't have to spray paint the sides like if I went with clear, stop algae growth, whatever. I'll get into that in another video. So all we're going to do here is basically drill out 6 holes across the top to drop our net pots into, and make sure we have a hole drilled somewhere in the side or access somewhere in the side for our air lines. So let's get at her. So I'm just going to start out by marking the center of each net pot so I know where I'm going to drill my holes. I'm a little bit OCD, so I want to get these as centered as possible. Though it's not critical they be perfectly spaced apart. So next up, it's time to drill our holes. Now I find it easiest to use a hole saw like I'm using here, but you can also use scissors or a knife or whatever will make a nice clean cut if you don't want to spend the money on a hole saw. If you are using a hole saw, make sure you start out by going in forward until you fit into the plastic, then flip it into reverse to finish your hole. It makes for a much nicer and cleaner cut. Go ahead and repeat the process for all of your lids. Alright, so that's all of the holes drilled in the top of our deep water hydroponic system. So we wound up with 4 containers that look like that. Next up, we're just going to take our net pots, so in this case I have 3-inch net pots, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop them in the holes. So that's 1, I got another 24 to do. And then up next we'll be assembling everything on the rack. Alright, so the rack I'm using here is just a standard wire shelf that you'd find in, say, a kitchen or a pantry or anything like that. They work really well because their shelves can hold quite a bit of weight for the size. In addition, they're completely adjustable for height depending on how you want to set up your grow. And lastly, if I ever wanted to control for temperature and humidity, all I would need to do is enclose this metal rack. Finally, I've set all of this inside a custom-built cabinet. The only reason I did this is because it's within a living area of my house and I wanted the entire setup to look nice. This also gives me a nice area to mount all my air lines and electrical wires. Alright, so it's time for the final step of building our DIY deep water culture hydroponic system. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to set up our deep wells now. So we've had our seeds germinating in our rock wool for a while, and it's time to get them transplanted and moved over into the net pots. So the first thing we're going to do is transfer over our nutrient solution. So in here I have about 16 or so liters. It's already got the nutrient solution added and it's already been pH'd. So in this case I pH'd to right around 5.9. I like it a little bit higher during vegetative growth, which is what the plants currently are in. And then what I'll do is I'll drop that down a little bit when we move into flowering, when I transition my nutrient solution over in a couple weeks. So let's get at it and we'll go from there. So as I'm adding, I'm keeping a close eye on the level of my nutrient solution. I want it to be close or just touching the bottom of my net pots. Alright, so all of our net pots are sitting nicely now, just touching the water, not actually submerged. So next up we're going to start adding some hydroton. So one of the things you want to make sure when you use this is that you pre-wash it. So it's extremely dusty, extremely dirty. You want to wash all that out before you actually add it to your net pots. Alright, so let's start adding that hydroton, and we're just going to cover that bottom of our net pots. So what we'll do is we'll grab our seedlings here, and we're going to plop them in. So we're got a little too much in here right now. And you basically want them to sit just below the rim of your net pot. And my pepper seedling's not quite ready for transplanting yet, so we're just going to leave him still in the starter, and we're just going to put these 3 in for now. So next, all we're going to do is basically fill the rest of the net pots with hydroton and just surround that rock wool. And that's really all there is to actually transplanting our seedlings into our deep water culture. So the last thing we'll do is we'll lift the lid quick, we'll hook up our airline when we set it on our shelf, and then we're good to go. I will give them a little bit of a water because I've noticed my rock wool is getting a little bit dry. And I'll just keep an eye on it until the roots actually push through those net pots and make sure that rock wool, or my starting material, stays with enough moisture in it to keep those plants moist but still aerated. Alright, so that's really it. So now that we have our aeration, our air stone hooked on, let me pull out this middle net pot. You can see I'm getting really nice movement of my nutrient solution, really nice bubbling right across the entire surface. And that's really the last step to setting up our deep water culture. Alright guys, so that pretty much does it for our DIY deep water system. Really simple system to build. You don't have to go quite as complicated as I did here with 4 different containers. You can just simply grab an air stone, an air pump, grab yourself some 1/4 inch line, a Tupperware container, a few net pots, and throw it in a windowsill. As long as it gets enough sunlight, everything should grow pretty nicely. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two throughout this video. If you did, hit that subscribe button below, because we will have a lot more videos just like this one coming down the pipeline. And as with anything else, make sure you comment, leave a few suggestions below, because it's really your input that helps us make these videos better. So with that, we'll see you guys next time.